So I just have like a statement that I sent to the parking district yesterday and the town board relating to my concerns. There's been much discussion regarding the inaction of the Hartsdale Public Parking District, the board of directors, and my feelings relating to the issue. And simply, the facts are that the Hartsdale Public Parking District is chartered to only serve residents of unincorporated Greenberg. The parking district brochure clearly states, if you look at the website, it states the only residents of unincorporated town of Greenberg may use the commuter parking lots. That was on the website as of Sunday. On January 21st, 2018, we found that the Edgemont Incorporation Committee contracted with a law firm, Duane Morris, for a legal opinion on what the status of parking would be in the event Edgemont was successful in their attempt to leave the unincorporated town of Greenberg and become a village. The Duane Morris opinion, with which I strongly disagree, opinion that Edgemont would end up with control of commuter parking lot D and E at the Hartsdale Metro North train station. There are 658 parking spaces in the 4 commuter lots at the Hartsdale Metro North train station, lots A, D, E, and F. Lots D and E, the EIC attorney's opinion would revert to a proposed Edgemont Village, contains 264 of the 658 spaces at the Hartsdale train station, Greenberg, the rest of unincorporated Greenberg would lose 40% of its total commuter parking spaces if the EIC opinion was sustained in a legal action, which would be a major disruption for residents of unincorporated Greenberg. In addition, Site D contains an array of cell towers with leases which will generate nearly $140,000 of income in 2020, increasing annually, which would be lost forever. These fees decrease the cost of parking for the remainder of the Hartsdale Public Parking District facilities. Site D also contains our Muni meter installation of 36 parking spaces, which accommodates Greenberg residents who do not have Hartsdale public parking permits, but who wish to park at the Hartsdale station. These municipal hourly and daily meters generate $80,000 per year. The first and only public comment made by the Hartsdale Public Parking District Board occurred on March 5th, 2018, in response to the EIC Duane Morris legal opinion. Since the EIC began its recent efforts to incorporate a village of Edgemont, and this is a direct quote, the board has been careful not to comment publicly on these efforts or their potential impact on the Hartsdale Public Parking District, since the board feels strongly that it should not make any public statements that could have an impact or influence the results of any vote regarding such proposed incorporation. I believe very strongly that the Hartsdale Public Parking District has a responsibility to protect the commuter parking facilities for its actual constituency, the residents of unincorporated town of Greenberg, not the residents of any village. I believe our residents should have all the information necessary so they could establish a course of action regarding this serious matter. I believe that our neighbors regarding an Edgemont should also have the information available regarding possible future rights to parking at the Hartsdale Metro North train station, so they may make an informed decision at the time of a vote. I believe every resident and the elected officials of the town of Greenberg need to have all the information necessary to ensure that the public parking is sustainable now and in the future. The future of the residential growth of our town is partially dependent on commuter parking. Based upon these actions, which I believe is highly irresponsible, I would not vote for Mrs. Groden's reappointment to the Parking District Board of Directors, And I also strongly recommend to the town board and that we petition the state legislature to eliminate the board and to turn over the functions of the Hartsdale Public Parking District to the town board, which is an elected board elected, and let the residents of Greenberg through the town board make the decision as to who should be the future decisions of the parking district. Other concerns I have is we're looking at the Four Corners in Hartsdale. Some people are for it, some people are against it, but I feel that it will make much more sense if we're really looking at the Four Corners to have a town board making all policy decisions relating to the future of the Four Corners, rather than have an appointed parking district board as a policy. And again, my goal is really simple: to ensure the protection of commuter parking as it was intended for the residents of unincorporated town of Greenberg now and forever, for the rest 100 years. I also think, and this is something that I was thinking of just a few minutes ago, the basic issue, as I could see, is what everybody in Edgemont and everybody in unincorporated Greenberg deserves to know before there's a vote on this Edgemont incorporation, what the ramifications are. Will Edgemont take away 40% of the parking? Will unincorporated Greenberg residents lose parking privileges? Will Edgemont residents have no parking privileges? Or if there's a priority, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, there's a lot of people in Hartsdale because the demographics have changed. They have more cars, and Edgemont people, and there's a long waiting list, because I think there's been waiting lists for the parking district. Will residents of unincorporated Greenberg, in the event that there's a waiting list, have priority over residents of Edgemont if there is a village of Edgemont? And I am really disgusted by the fact that the Hartsdale Public Parking District is keeping their thoughts secret, because people are going to be voting on this without having information. And if you say to us, do you know what, unincorporated Greenberg residents are going to get screwed if Edgemont breaks away, then the town board we could decide how we're going to handle it. If you say, on the other hand, that that Edgemont residents are going to lose parking privileges, then the Edgemont Incorporation Committee and residents who are on the fence, they may say, you know what, maybe it's not a good idea, or they can make a decision. But right now you're giving us no information. You're giving the public no information. I think people are making judgments, whether they're for incorporation or against it, on the basis of propaganda from one side or the other side, but not on the facts. And I want to know what the facts are, and I think the parking district has an obligation. On the other hand, originally when I proposed this, there's other issues. I would like to see the residency requirement abolished, because I think that, for me, it's very, very offensive. I think it reminds, again, I've said about this for decades, since I've been in office. I think that nobody, I ran against a renter. And if somebody could run for office and doesn't own property and is qualified to be town supervisor, I think that, that's fine. If a tenant could run for president of the United States, a tenant could run for governor, a tenant could run for state senator, state assembly, member of Congress, but they can't be on the parking district. I think that's wrong, and I think that that has to change. I also feel that if the town board decides to keep the parking district and disagrees with me on abolishing it, I think there should be at least one commuter on the parking district, and I think there should be a merchant on East Hartsdale Avenue on the parking district. I feel that we should expand the board and get more representation. You're spending a lot of money. It's a big budget. There's a lot of policy decisions, and I feel having more people impacted, influencing the decision-making process is great. It is important. Democracy works best when there's more oversight. Parking district meetings should be televised because basically it's a public board that makes decisions that impact many commuters and residents of unincorporated Greenberg, so I have a lot of concerns, and that's basically my comments. But,
right. So I just wanted to say, I know that Councilwoman Jutner, thought that it would be helpful to have a public discussion, and I don't know what the parameters of this are going to be, and I know we have some attorneys here on behalf of the parking district, so I don't know who's speaking, but if you're going to speak, maybe we can just identify ourselves and then just have a constructive dialogue. Sure. Mm-hmm. There is a resolution on the agenda, my understanding is for tomorrow, that the board has to consider, so we're trying to help them get informed about making a good decision.
Sure. And I'd just like to let people know that apparently there was a letter sent by email earlier today. I did not receive it, so I'm just reading it now on my phone.
I brought hard copies to make that easier. I apologize it came in so late, but there's been a lot of information, of course, flying around.
Sure.
Mr. Supervisor, may we respond? Thank you. So these are hard copies, Madam Clerk. There's plenty of copies here. Sorry to slide it across the table, but we're separating.
Please state your name, please.
My name is Seth Mandelbaum from McCullough, Goldberger, and Stout. I'm special counsel to the Hartsdale Public Parking District. All three commissioners are here. Perhaps you can all introduce yourselves. Myrna is also going to be speaking in a moment. So.
Myrna Anover. I'm the Treasurer Commissioner for the Hartsdale Public Parking District. I've been with I've been a commissioner for about 20 years. I worked at the United Nations, commuted for many decades, at least 2.5. Now I've retired, and I have a local real estate business in Scarsdale, actually. So, I still use the train system, and I do commute to the city, because I also have a real estate company in Manhattan.
Thank you.
Barbara Broden, I'm a chairperson of Hartsdale Public Parking. I've also been on the board for 19 years. I am a local merchant or business person on East Hartsdale Avenue, and I've had an office on East Hartsdale Avenue for over 30 years. So, although I don't have a retail store, I do communicate with the retail people and with the apartment buildings on the avenue through both town and the police department for issues that come up. So I do feel that I represent the local community.
Thank you. Bill?
I'm Bill Sicari, the third commissioner, and most recently appointed about 2.5 years ago by Paul Feiner. And I've been a resident of Hartsdale.
And the board.
And the board. Well, I wasn't there, so excuse me.
Okay.
And I've been a resident of Hartsdale for 37 years. I was a commuter for a number of those years, and so very familiar with the challenges for commuting.
Okay. John?
John Lovelace, Special Counsel of the Hartsdale Public Parking District, Lakewood Parish.
Thanks. So that's our group. If I might, I'd just like to summarize a few points from my letter, which I'm hopeful you'll all have an opportunity to review before tomorrow night's consideration of the resolution. And there's also a letter attached signed by all three commissioners, which addresses in some greater detail. I sort of address some of the legal points, and they address some of the factual issues that have been raised over the last couple of weeks. First of all, I would like to thank you for the vote on February 26th not to adopt the resolution at that time that was described by the supervisor, which really gave us an opportunity to digest what was being proposed and to file these responses, which a lot of effort and thought went into to try to inform the town board and the public regarding how the commissioners view some of these issues. So I have a couple of brief comments, and then Myrna Anover also has some comments on behalf of the board. First, I'd like to note that we did appear at an executive work session on February 4th at the request of the supervisor and the board. We were over there with Gene Huff, who's general counsel to the district, and there were no minutes or video that I'm aware of that meeting, but I went back through my notes, and although the supervisor, among many issues, mentioned in passing the possibility of an increase in the number of board members, my recollection was not that we ever consented or agreed or said, yeah, that sounds great. It was just sort of an issue among many that were discussed in that setting. So from our perspective, and perhaps there was a misunderstanding, but none of us thought we walked out of that meeting having consented or agreed to increase the number of commissioners from 3 to 7. And unfortunately, we should have been checking the agendas, I suppose, but I signed back up for the email list. When my email switched over, somehow I was dropped off the list. But we did find out, and obviously we appeared on the 26th through council to request some additional time, which again, thank you for giving. On the property ownership issue, in doing some research, we respectfully disagree with the supervisor's characterization of that policy as somehow being offensive or race-based. None of us were there in 1950, of course, or 1952. But we believe, for the reasons that are in the letter from the commissioners that Myrna will summarize, that that's certainly not the effect of that policy, and there are some actually very sound economic reasons for that, which I'll take you through in a moment in writing. But in my research, I also found a 2010 case from Westchester County Supreme Court where the supervisor challenged an issue with respect to the residency requirement, arguing that it violated the Equal Protection Clause of the New York State Constitution. The court dismissed the case for lack of standing, but also found that it did not violate the New York State Constitution to have a special district board with a landowner requirement. And as far as I can tell, that decision was not appealed. At least it didn't show up in Westlaw as having been appealed. I also did some research regarding New York State town law and what the process is to dissolve a district such as this one.
Can I ask you if HPPD actually advocated to continue the ownership in the 2010 case?
I'm not sure. I was not involved in that case. The decision was a pretty short decision by the Supreme Court and really did focus mostly on standing.
But in your moving papers, was the HPPD advocating that that's a good policy?
John Lovelace again, Blakely, Platt, and Schmidt. I worked with
There's
Gene
a
Huff on
microphone that somebody's using.
John Lovelace, Blakely, Platt, and Schmidt. I worked with Gene Huff on those papers, and we were responding to an action that was brought by the town against the district, and we moved to dismiss. That motion was granted, but we were defending the policy, but we didn't take any position one way or the other. It was the policy, and it remains the policy, and the court, in citing a relevant Court of Appeals decision, found there was nothing violative of the Equal Protection Clause to contain a property, that you be a deeded owner of property to be on the board.
Thanks, John. Just two other points. I did also research town law section 202C2, which lays out procedures to dissolve a district by a town board. There are several criteria under which a town board is allowed to do that after holding a public hearing, but in this case, there's 3 criteria and only one of them is complied with, and therefore the town board does not have the ability to unilaterally dissolve the district. And my reading of the case law and some of the interpretation of it is that that can only be done by a special act of the New York State Legislature.
I just want to mention that what I'm asking for is for the town board to petition the state legislature to abolish the district. I realize that the town doesn't have the authority unilaterally.
Okay.
Or the alternative would be to expand the board and abolish the residency requirement. That would also require state legislation.
Yep. Just wanted to be clear on what the criteria are in the town law. And finally, as we talked about on February 4th, you did cite to our very brief response to the Edgemont legal opinions that were put out a couple of years ago, which was done reluctantly with a lot of thought and careful wording, because the board's main objective is to not be perceived or put out any statement that could be used by either side, either proponents or opponents of incorporation. I've advised them to this. I know, they're represented by council, but they're all independent folks with the best interests of the district at heart. None of us can predict what's going to happen. Assuming eventually a petition is approved to go to a vote, and there's a vote, and the village is incorporated, there is a process in New York state law for a reason. There's an 18-month period or so that provided for negotiation. There's a court process that's also provided for, and reasonable people can certainly disagree about this, but my advice, and I think the board is taking that advice, is not to be advocating for any position publicly, because it's a hypothetical that may never happen, and there's a process, and none of us know how that process is going to play out.
Can I just ask you a question? I just think that it's really unfair. As I said, before, the Edgemont Incorporation Committee, they're claiming that as much as 40% of the parking spaces that currently exist could be lost for residents of the rest of unincorporated Greenberg if Edgemont breaks away. I think that if their legal interpretation, which I disagree with, is right, it will create havoc for the rest of unincorporated Greenberg. On the other hand, if Edgemont does break away and the Hartsdale Parking District decides, the parking district decides that they're not giving Edgemont residents parking, it will create major problems for residents of Edgemont. So what I'm asking for is basically, I think, for everyone, for unincorporated Greenberg and for the people in Edgemont who are thinking about breaking away, I think that everybody deserves an answer. What's going to happen? What are the risks? What are the risks for Hartsdale people? What the demographics in Hartsdale could change? You've had waiting lists over the years. If Edgemont basically breaks away, and there's a waiting list where people who currently live in Edgemont and have parking privileges lose their parking spots, because that's very, very possible. And this could be litigated. And it would make sense for your board to give us what you honestly think it could happen, and then everybody could, and then the community, both sides could decide, is there going to be litigation or what? And then at the time there's a vote, there'll be an intelligent decision. Because I don't want people making their decision based on propaganda or campaign literature. I basically want them to make a decision based on what is possibly going to happen. And there's a good chance that's going to happen. And we're talking about people's lives. I was at a gas station a few days ago, and there's somebody who said he disagrees with me on the Edgemont Incorporation. He's part of the Edgemont Incorporation Committee. He said, Incorporation Community. He said he probably will vote against the incorporation because he's worried about the parking. Now, maybe if he had assurances that the parking was not at risk, maybe he would change. He would vote for it. Maybe there's people who would vote against it because they don't really know. There's too much uncertainty.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Mona, would you please provide your information as a longtime commissioner?
Yeah. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak to you, make a statement tonight. Supervisor Feiner and the rest of the board. The Hartsdale Public Parking District Board has been comprised of 3 members since its creation in 1950. All of the commissioners have been appointed by the town in accordance with the enabling charter and have served the parking district and the residents of the unincorporated section of the town of Greenberg. The HPPD board runs the district in a fiscally responsible manner, which has resulted in the district being able to build 2 new multi-level garages since the establishment of the district, as well as putting into place a capital plan for extensive repairs in the parking areas and the ability to offer several new meter payment systems, while keeping up with the changing times. The district's budget is carefully planned over the short and long term to achieve these financial objectives. The HPPD board listens to their permit holders' suggestion and will shortly be offering a new simplified application process that will require only 2 proofs of residency and which has the ability of becoming an internet-based application in the future. HPPD has not had any communications from any regulatory agencies concerning non-compliance with or deficiencies in our financial reporting practices, nor have we received any notice of violations of budget ordinances, laws, and regulations, or in the administration of any of our contracts. The principal and interest on serial bonds acquired through the town to finance the district's property acquisitions and capital improvements to the parking district's properties are the responsibility of the district. All these expenses are solely and exclusively financed through HPPD funds using no town resources. The funds are collected from permit sales and money received from parking meters in lots, garages, and on the street. All the money received from parking tickets is paid directly to the town, to the court, and goes into the town's general budget. The district's charter and related deeds intended the primary purpose of the parking facilities as parking for commuters using the railroad and to offer parking for merchants and customers for the businesses in Hartsdale. The HPPD has offered permits for a limited number of overnight and 24-hour spaces for residents living in Hartsdale Avenue in accordance with the charter and in terms of existing deeds. In 2010, the supervisor personally sued the district to have a non-property owner serve as a member of the Board of Commissioners. The court found that statutes can distinguish between landowners and non-landowners in limited-use districts, such as the parking district. The court dismissed the case and held that land ownership requirement for a commissioner is valid and does not violate the Equal Protection Clause of the state constitution. The HPPD is properly managed and operated by a diverse 3-member Board of Commissioners. All 3 members do not agree with Paul Feiner's proposal to expand the board, nor to eliminate the requirement of property ownership. In closing, we believe that Barbara Groden should be reappointed now for another term. As a business owner in real estate management industry, her expertise has been extremely helpful with the administration of HPPD staff and many construction projects that have been ongoing in the district and at the Metro North Station in Hartsdale. The fact that Ms. Groden has not actively advocated for either side in the ongoing hypothetical incorporation saga is irrelevant to her credentials. Her proven track record with HPPD clearly warrants her reappointment. We request that her reappointment be confirmed immediately. The incorporation Mr. Feiner has asked us to speak about is a hypothetical situation. The HPPD has not had any talks or negotiations with any party concerning incorporation. The HPPD is unable to and will not negotiate with any party until a vote, if one is ever held, and there is a newly elected village board. The law reads that should any party have an incorporation and become a village, the parking district will negotiate with that village within the first 18 months and try to come to a reasonable solution, and only if a reasonable solution can't be found, then all parties will go before a judge for resolution. The HPPD does not feel that a battle of memos over what we think could happen is beneficial to any party. The HPPD will do whatever it can to continue supporting all of the residents of the unincorporated section of the town of Greenberg with their parking needs as we have done so in the past. We thank you for inviting us tonight, and we would like to invite the members of the town board to join us at one or several of our monthly meetings to get a flavor of what we do at HPPD. Our next meeting is on March 23 at 4 p.m. Respectfully, the Board of Commissioners.
To be clear, I do attend those meetings on a regular basis.
I know that.
As liaison to the
Thank
Department, to
you.
the Hartsdale Public Parking District.
Thank you very much, Martin. And yes, I've seen Councilperson Jones many times at those meetings.
Unrelated matter, would you be open to televising your meetings, like the town board and planning board and zoning board?
Well, I can answer that one. So unfortunately, the Hartsdale Public District office is not set up with any kind of a television system. So we would have to meet at another location, which could be done if someone would offer us a location. But right now, we meet there.
You can meet here.
That's something the board could consider. But we don't have that. What we do, though, is we take minutes at every meeting. Those minutes are reviewed at the following month. They're approved. And a copy of those minutes are given to the town of Greenberg for their records. And they're also kept as the permanent record of the Hartsdale Public Parking District.
Thank you. Just in conclusion, again, thank you for considering our comments today. With respect to the resolution that's on the agenda once again tomorrow night, we ask the board to once again deny that resolution, and also we oppose, as you've heard, any efforts to dissolve or discontinue the district, which has fulfilled its purpose and its charter for nearly 70 years here in the town of Greenberg. Thank you.
We're happy to answer any questions the board might have.
I had a question for Mr. Lovelace as the attorney in the 2010 litigation, I believe you said, right?
Yes.
Do you know whether
Yes.
do you know or do you recall whether the standing issue was at all related to the equal protection issue? In other words, that the plaintiff could not show standing in either instance?
No, the court dismissed the decision on standing, but then went out of its way and said, had we considered the equal protection clause for the reasons set forth in the Court of Appeals case, they found that it was not violative of the equal protection clause under the state or federal constitution.
The marked paragraph is essentially.
Okay.
So it was, it was not instrumental to the dismissal, but it was cited by the court as a valid provision of law.
Okay. So it wasn't that the plaintiff didn't have standing to argue the equal protection issue?
No, it was that he didn't have standing to bring the action, so the
Okay.
case was dismissed. But had they reviewed the equal protection claim on its merits, it would have been dismissed as well.
Okay, thank you.
And the Court of Appeals case is quite clear on that. If you go back and read that, the Court of Appeals was clear on the fact that in a special use district like the parking district, the landowner requirement is a valid criteria.
Okay. During the course of that litigation, did you have an opportunity to review any of the documents or other circumstances around the creation of the district?
Yes.
And did anything untoward or perhaps violative of the Equal Protection Clause come up?
No, what came up to my recollection, one of these documents from 1950s, but also this litigation was from 10 years ago, and I've lived a couple lives since then, litigation-wise. But the reasoning in 1950 and in 1952, and is confirmed by the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court when they dismissed the supervisor's case, was that the landowners are the parties who are responsible for the bonds in the event of a default. And therefore, they had most to lose in the event of a default and financial insolvency. So they felt that that was a legitimate criteria for the decision-making process, because the landowners were the ones who ultimately bore that burden. That's, as I recall, the basis for it. That's why the district was created that way and maintained in that way.
Would that be true also, though, if we defaulted on the bonds that the town board approves? And not all the board members have to be property owners?
Right, but in a limited special use district, it's a more finite, there are a lot more issues that you have to deal with, and I think the supervisor's points on the town board hold more weight when you're dealing with a more general criteria. I mean, you and I can agree or disagree. The fact of the matter is it was a valid criteria, and the court dismissed the case. I understand that Supervisor Feiner disagrees with that, and I suppose you do as well, but it doesn't make it illegitimate.
I'd really be curious to see what papers you submitted. I mean, there's the decision, but I'd like to see what papers you submitted.
I believe it's in the court's record, and the town attorney should have
Actually
the
get them
paper.
on Westlaw. I'm pretty sure. Quickly looking, you can click through.
I mean, I was surprised the issue came up again without reviewing the papers. Seems like the district shouldn't have to, address this case every 10 years.
Well, this whole idea came up relatively recently.
Right.
So, and of the reasons espoused, the one that resonated with me was this one.
Right.
So that's why, and I, just haven't had an opportunity to, review the cases. The town attorney will make them available, and I certainly will.
Okay.
Mr. Feiner, if I can just address, you had asked about other individuals being willing to serve on the board. If you remember, unfortunately, when Ruth passed away, we did speak, and we called a number of people off the commuter list to see if any of those people would be interested in working with the board. I think we called 20 people, all within the district area. None of them were available or interested. And then we also spoke to several of the merchants who also would be within the district. They actually worked in Hartsdale and lived in the Hartsdale area. The gentleman at the bakery, D. Franchetic, and there was one more, but I'm sorry, I'm losing the thought of who that person was. There were 3 of them that we had went to talk to see if they would be interested, and they all declined. Basically, didn't feel that they needed to, that they were happily being dealt with in reference to merchant permits and their customers. They didn't really want to spend the time. It's the same reason we don't have a Rotary or a Chamber of Commerce in the village of Hartsdale.
But since then, I've spoken to people who are interested in the board. Concern, 2 concerns that I have. One is, right now, the town is embarked on the study of the 4 corners in Hartsdale, and that's going to be either is going to move forward or nothing's going to happen. But there's a lot of interest in the community, and to me, the decisions of a parking district are going to impact the future of the 4 corners in Hartsdale. And I feel that at the minimum, having more members, more of a voice, because this is such an important town issue that's going to have long-term ramifications. You're not talking about 20 units of housing. You're talking about possibly a few hundred apartments. A whole area is going to be redeveloped. So I would like to see more oversight of the parking district, and I also would like to see more people involved in making decisions that are going to impact the four corners. But the second thing, which I really am very, very concerned about, is we're looking at possibly more apartments, more residencies. You're looking at the possibility of unincorporated Greenberg. I'm not talking about Edgemont. The rest of unincorporated Greenberg losing, if the Edgemont Incorporation Committee is correct, as much as 40% of the available parking. So there's going to be people in Hartsdale, people who are going to be moving into these new apartments. If they are correct, which I don't think they are, but their lawyers think that that they are, there's going to be a lot of people who are not going to be able to get parking. And I feel that the parking district or the decisions being made, I want to see a parking district fight for unincorporated Greenberg, and I feel that this is probably one of the most important decisions of the town board is going to be, be making. The other question I have is the Dwayne Morris opinion that the Edgemont Incorporation Committee, they hired an attorney, and they made a representation that 40% of unincorporated Greenberg would lose their parking spots. Do you agree with that interpretation? Do you think that it's going to be litigated? And basically, would the parking district say, you know what, this is totally wrong, they don't know what they're talking about, or it's a correct interpretation because if you think, you have, the Hartsdale Parking District is paying right now two law firms to review, this issue. So tell us what you think, tell the community what you think, and this way, if people disagree, they could basically, they could have a discussion.
Well, first of all, our two rates combined are probably less than one lawyer at Dwayne Morris, but that's neither here nor there. Commissioner Gordon would like to
I'm going to
respond.
answer that on behalf of the three commissioners. We do have two counsel sitting here tonight. Our general counsel is home, not feeling well, and didn't want to join us for that reason. We thank her for that, and wish she gets better. John is actually working with us on the MTA. So we have different attorneys that handle different projects for us, and they both do an excellent job. None of us are practicing attorneys, so we always go out to get the best consultation we can when we're making decisions for the district. But Paul, you're asking us to give you information that we went seeking when Edgemont Incorporation had a paper put out. No, he's fine.
Well, it's actually, if we want a tissue, that's it.
Thank you very much.
So they had a legal opinion come out. We did state at that point that we may not agree with that legal opinion. We did go and hire an attorney who gave us a legal opinion. But in the same respect, it's a hypothetical case, and the thought was that we are not going to release that hypothetical answer that we might have at this moment because it's not pertinent. We have a day-to-day job of running the parking district.
Right, but on the other hand, I think it's grossly unfair because basically you have a legal opinion that that a government body paid for, and basically this is something that is going to dramatically impact everyone in unincorporated Greenberg who wants a parking permit, and everyone in Edgemont who is possibly going to be voting for or against incorporation. And you're not going to tell them what the major concern is. Because there's people in the Edgemont Incorporation Committee who basically said that if Edgemont loses the parking, it's dead. It's not going to happen. So the thing is, if there's a real risk to Edgemont residents that they are going to lose parking privileges, they should know before the vote, not after. Because after the vote, it's too late. And if there's people in unincorporated Greenberg who are going to lose 40% of the parking spots, the rest of the unincorporated Greenberg, they're going to lose 40% of the parking spots. They should know also because they may want to voice their opinion. And I'm not saying you have to campaign for or against it. I'm saying give us the facts, tell us what people could expect, what are the ramifications, what are the legal possibilities, and then everybody could decide. If people in Edgemont vote for the incorporation because they got some glitzy literature piece saying vote for this, everything will be okay, and then a month later, after they incorporate, they lose the parking processes, they're going to lose the parking permits, and then they're going to be angry that they were lied to and deceived, and there was misrepresentation, but it's too late. Because at that time, and I'm sort of glad this is taped, because I hope that at some point, if people will say years from now, at least there was a warning. I want everyone in Edgemont and I want everyone in unincorporated Greenberg to know what the risks are before there's a vote.
Okay. Barb was correct. I'm here as a courtesy because of my role previously and because Ms. Huff is not feeling well. But, by my take, the village law is the village law, and the town law department can offer that opinion to the people of the unincorporated Greenberg as well as we can. And I think that you should have your own understanding of what the risks are of incorporation, whether you agree with Dwayne, with the Edgemont EIC's opinion, whether you disagree. I don't think it's our role to tell the town or its residents where they come down on this issue.
But I believe that Edgemont residents will lose parking. That's my own personal opinion. I believe that if I disagree with the Edgemont, the law firm Dwayne Morris, I think that their interpretation is wrong, and I think that many Edgemont residents are at great risk of losing parking privileges if they vote for the incorporation. Because there's going to be different town boards, there's going to be different parking district members 10 years from now, 15 years from now. But I think they're going to lose the privileges. But the thing is, everybody, people look at the parking district and they may say, you know what, you're a little bit more independent. I may have more confidence in your legal opinions than a town board related opinion because, I've been pretty outspoken on this. So I'm saying, give us your facts and let all the sides, the people in unincorporated Greenberg, the people in the villages, in Edgemont, the people throughout the town, basically decide for themselves if there really is a great risk that Edgemont residents are going to have a village, and they're not going to have parking. They probably won't have the town pool. There's a lot of other risks that they could end up having that they are not aware that they're going to be suffering from.
And just like town services, this will be a negotiation. That is what we have said consistently. That is our position. I'm not going to share an attorney-client privilege legal opinion with the world for one side or the other or both to try to use in this matter. And we hear everything that's been said tonight. The board, of course, will have to take it under advisement. We're not going to give you an answer right now, but we obviously feel very strongly about it, and the commissioners have their thoughts as well. But we've heard everything that was said tonight, but
Okay.
that is our position at the
I just
moment.
have a question really quick.
Yes.
Just so I make sure I understand the issue. So I understand the concern that the parking district may have in offering an opinion about a future incorporation, and that's not even on the table. That's not the concern. Do you have any thoughts about expanding the board? Is that something that you're just diametrically opposed to doing? And if there's a reason for that, what is it? As opposed to going from 3 to 5 to 7, how do you feel about that? And also, I understand the property requirement, although it's been explained to me, I didn't consider this, that in other contexts, you do have non-property owners who are sitting on boards making decisions that affect property owners. So maybe we can address those issues, because those are relevant to
That's relevant tomorrow night. That's a
Okay.
good point. Who wants to take the 3 to 5 to 7?
I'll take the 3 to 5 to 7.
Well, wait a second.
No.
Let him speak, and then you have your
She's
conference.
getting ready to make a comment.
And then
Let's
you
let her
can
make a
comment.
comment.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Groden.
Okay, so right now, a 3-member board has been very successful in running the Hartsdale Public Parking District. The parking district is a little different than some of the other boards, like the planning board and the zoning board. We have a day-to-day responsibility of managing the parking areas, the staff in the office, making sure that our budget is correct for our capital projects. We've just spent a great deal of time coming up with a new pay-by-phone system with Passport. The town is aware. We tried to discuss it with the town, and we did have to come up with a different system so we could make it work for both parties and at no expense to the town. So we have worked hard as a board to do this. This is not where we meet just once a month for our public meeting. We must talk to each other several times a week in order to make things happen for the district. We've had a change in management. Our office management changed a few years ago so that we don't have the past history that we used to have. Like you have, we have people concerned with illness. We have somebody who's currently out of the office, somebody who's going to be going out also. These are things that are dealt with by the board. So if you put another board member on, they're going to have to spend that amount of time with the rest of us and be available for all of this. It's not just come to one meeting a month and make a few decisions, because during the month we're making plans. Right now, Bill's been working very hard with the engineers because we have summer construction projects, and he's going to be the liaison with the engineering group for us. Myrna's been working with the office, as I have been, because we're having these personnel issues that have to be dealt with. We have to make sure that everything functions every day. That if the gates are going down and nobody knows how to call for repairs, one of us can know how to call for a repair. So we're a hands-on board. If you can find somebody, Paul, who you think that would be better than one of us, please approach us with it. okay? But just saying to add a person for another body who isn't going to offer us something to add to what we're already doing makes it difficult. I sit on a number of boards, and if you just have people coming and they're only interested in their own one thought and what they want for themselves, it's going to be very hard for them to communicate on the parking district board.
But the town board is basically is sort of like the parking district, because there's no official chief executive. We, as a board, make all the decisions for the town, and we're a 5-member board. So, what would be wrong with expanding, say, the district from 3 to 5, have another commuter, invite a merchant, or even originally I thought 7. But but my feeling is there's nothing wrong with getting more input. If you televise the meetings, if there's more involvement, if more people are scrutinizing the decisions, they may be different. It may be tougher because if there's nobody watching you, the meetings are going to be great, and it's going to be friendlier, and there's going to be no controversy. If you televise it and there's more people, and people have different views, there's going to be more controversy, and there'll be people showing up differing with some of the decisions, which is healthy in a democracy. Because I think, if we had one person making on a board, like if I had no town board, my life would be really easy. But the thing is, you have 3 people, it's tougher. If you have 5 people, it's even harder. And if you televise it and people start showing up, it's even harder because there's more oversight, more scrutiny, and all that. So that's basically what I'm asking for your board. I mean, there's so many decisions that you're making.
Right, but it's an interesting point, I think, though, that the fewer people involved in making all of those everyday on-the-ground decisions, the faster and more expeditiously, efficiently they can be made.
Yeah, but
I mean, one of the challenges I think that we have as a board of 5 is exactly the day-to-day institutional running of the things that go on here in this building. So I do think that is a point that we should consider when we think about expanding the board or asking someone else to expand.
Yeah, but you know what? Anyone in government, everybody wants nobody to watch them. That's because it's easier if nobody's paying attention, nobody's checking, nobody's looking over your shoulders, and we live in a democracy. And there should be more scrutiny, there should be more involvement, there should be more participation and more oversight. So I feel that, at the minimum, if you're afraid of expanding your board, what's the reason you're afraid? What's the real reason? Do you want people not to look at the contracts? Do you want people not to look at the decisions? Maybe the permits are very, very high. Maybe if there'd be more oversight, maybe somebody new who could come up with a creative idea to have better rates, better fees. I'm not sure. Maybe they can't. Maybe they can. But I just really believe in a democracy we need checks and balances for everything. And that's why I think the town board plays a very important role, because everybody on this board spends time scrutinizing and criticizing things sometimes I do. I think that's good.
Mr. Supervisor, I must correct a couple of facts that were just stated as facts. A, no one used the word afraid when talking about expanding the board, so if there are minutes, I'd like to reflect that no one from this board said we are afraid of anything with respect to that. There's also a letter, I understand you just got it, I hope you read it before tomorrow night, that compares the rates for commuters for the Hartsdale district with some other nearby districts, and the rates are actually the lowest, not the highest, compared to Scarsdale and White Plains. So that is also not accurate to say that. You've said it many times, and it's just not accurate. So you talked about facts. Let's have all the facts out there as the board considers this vote tomorrow night, which once again we urge you to turn down the resolution one more time.
Okay, all of our meetings are publicly open, are open to the public. They're noticed on our website. We've had people come. You've come to meetings. Other people here have come to meetings. We do listen to the consumer, people who use our permits. We've had an open meeting, and when we talk about our rates, we have a public hearing. We've listened to what the people said. They asked about having a change in the application process. We have made a change. The next quarter, it was when it was show. They asked about having pay-by-phones ability on the meters. We've been able to add that. So we have been listening to the consumer who's using our permits.
And, we are volunteers. We're not paid. We're volunteers. So we really spend our time on this. Believe me, I'd rather be out to dinner right now or any one of us. But we care a lot about what we do. And we really work hard at it. And I think we are very efficient, the three of us. And when we need to be there to solve a problem or a situation, we're there. We always make ourselves available.
I just want to say that, I'm a legal aid attorney. I practice in a lot of different municipalities across the county because I appear in different courts, so I end up parking in a lot of municipal parking structures. And one of the things I can say about the parking in the Hartsdale, in the town of Greenberg, is that it is by far head and shoulders above most of those other parking structures. It's maintained better. I guess that's the bottom line. It's maintained better. It's not falling down. There's no water dripping onto my car while it's parked there. I'm not afraid of going there at night because it's well lit and it's not dirty. And I think that the Board of Commissioners, as it's currently composed, does an excellent job. And because I am the liaison from the town board to the Board of Commissioners, I understand and have seen, how well the district is run fiscally. So I think that, it does need to be clear to the public that the district is being run well and that the facilities are being maintained well, and that they are, as far as I can see, much better maintained than other similarly sized facilities across the county, both South County and North County. I did have a question for the commissioners. One of the things that we've been talking about that both here and in HPPD meetings is the expansion of the Four Corners. And so I'd be interested in knowing whether Edgemont incorporates or not, if there's the possibility, along with the expansion of the Four Corners, of the district itself, of the district providing more parking along with that expansion, so that eventually, if the Four Corners expansion does come to fruition, there could be the possibility of adding extra parking spaces anyway, whether there's an incorporation.
I would say if we would to move forward on the Four Corners development, I think it's, first of all, something the town badly needs.
Yes.
It probably should have been done 20 years ago. For whatever reasons, it wasn't. But if it did happen, it should have additional parking and could be possibly part of the HPPD because we know how to run a parking facility. So the Four Corners development is something that we badly need and support. But the issue of adding people to the board, my one comment is this. What deficiency are we going to eliminate by having additional board members on this board? Now, that doesn't mean that we're the best informed people running a board, but we know enough what we don't know, and we hire the best people we can find. So if I were to say to you, Mr. Feiner, what type of an individual with a certain skill set I'd want to see on the board? I could only possibly think of someone with an engineering background, something a little bit beyond, say, Barbara's skill sets. Yet we have consulting engineers who focus on the parking industry only. It's different than building apartment buildings and residential homes. A building that you park cars in is very different. And we have Desmond Associates in Manhattan is our consulting engineer. So we really don't need the engineer on the board. What we need is managers, and I think we're pretty good managers. We run it efficiently. We hire the people we need when we need them. Council here, as an example, working with the MTA, which is rather fun. So I don't think another set of hands would necessarily improve our performance beyond what it is now. That's not to say, though, that a Supervisor Feiner feels strongly about adding a board member or two. We would like the opportunity to interview them also to see if there would be a fit, a synergy, but skills that these individuals would bring to the party. I'm retired, Barbara's working, Myrna's working. I can tell you it's a good thing I'm retired. If I was still working, I couldn't do this job. It just takes too much time. And I used to travel a lot.
So can I just say something? So,
yes, sure.
And again, this is, so add in help, an additional 2 members would take some of the load off because, as you just mentioned, Barbara's working, Myrna's working, and you're full-time. So you don't think additional hands would be helpful?
The hands we need really are just us making some decisions, and that's why we don't meet just once a month, which was what I thought we would always do, and that's what I was told would happen. We meet probably 3 or 4 times a month, probably once a week, and that's okay, that's fine. And we make a decision, and then we move ahead. I don't really think we need another set of hands to handle something. It's not like an administrative job or paper shuffling. This is just decision making.
But it's also spending money. First of all, I want to mention that after, when I asked you to be appointed, I've never, yes, since you've been appointed, told you how to vote. I've never tried influencing any. Is that true? I can't think of. I've never tried influencing you. No, I've never tried influencing anybody on any board that I voted for. My failing is that every government body that I know thinks that they're efficient and that nothing could be done better. But everybody, every government, everywhere in the country could always be run better. And it's sometimes having more oversight, more checks and balances, more scrutiny, you always find ways of tightening up and doing things differently, better, more eyes, more opinions. It's always valuable. My feeling is that if there would be 7 people on the board or 5 people, if the board would expand it, that's the interest. I want to have people. I would have no problem reaching out to the parking district and having the parking district work with the town board in selecting somebody from additional people from unincorporated Greenberg who could complement your board, just like we've done with the library board and the planning board. We basically involve them in the appointment process. But I really feel that if there'd be more people, I think it would be better. And I really hope that you'll consider televising your meetings. I've suggested that the Edgemont School Board televise their meetings. I've written to them. I've written to the fire districts. I want them to televise their meetings because I think that the public has a right to know what's going on. And if the meetings are not televised, then people don't know what's going on. And there's a few people who show up at every meeting, and they're the activists. But the average person who is impacted by the decisions doesn't know. And sometimes, from the town standpoint, when we have things on television, or when we do a really great job of trying to outreach, there's people from the community, civic association leaders and others who will review something and say, I think that you wasted money. I think you could have done something better. And that, I think, is very, 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 very healthy. And, that's why, if the Hartsdale Parking District would televise your meetings, in addition to having an expanded, board, that would be great. Maybe it will encourage the school districts that are not televising their meetings to consider being more transparent and open as well.
Just a final comment about oversight, Supervisor Feiner. We have Councilman Ken Jones, who is our liaison to your board, and he provides us with a lot of a view of the town of Greenberg's view of things, which helps us a lot.
But there's a lot of other people in the town who may have other ideas in addition to Councilman Jones.
But we have public sessions.
But people don't show up. But most people don't show up.
Well,
we've heard you. One final comment on this, on the point of expanding. Our position, as you've heard, is it should not be expanded for the reasons we've stated. If the board feels compelled to expand it, we ask that you amend the resolution to a maximum of 5, because certainly this board shouldn't be bigger than the town board, which deals with a much bigger budget and many more issues than this board does. But if you feel you have to do this, which we're asking you not to do, we ask that it be capped at 5, not 7, if you feel you have to go that way.
If we
As a
went to
board.
5, 5 instead of 7, and then, board members said, we would, work with your district if we, created a 5-member, board, we would work with you in terms of, finding, people who have, the skill sets that could be helpful, then would you, not oppose the state legislation? Because
Well, I have a question for you. Are you reappointing me then?
if
Or are you
we,
going to have 3 seats that you're going to fill?
This is just so inappropriate to have personnel discussion
That would
in
talk
public.
about it. We can't
It's
talk
just so wrong.
We can't do that.
So I think I need to speak to my clients before we can respond to that question. Our position is we don't think it should be expanded, but if you feel you need to expand it, it should be no more than 5. I think that's all we should say about it at this moment.
I think we have people who wanted to speak.
Okay, so, and I understand that they want to speak, I just want to know,
Okay, I just want to-
I want to understand, is it related to the resolution? I really don't want to get into an incorporation discussion. If they have something to add with respect to expansion of the district or property ownership, I think that would be productive. So with those caveats.
Those are the caveats, so anyone who wants to speak as counsel, you want to come sit up so you can use your microphone?
Sure. I'll speak to whatever the pleasure of any of the town board members wants to hear. So if you agree with the town attorney, that's fine. And if you don't, then just let me know and I'll just keep going.
Yeah, let's not bring it up.
Okay. So this meeting to me is a little confusing. It's really unclear what the goal is. When the resolution was initially put forth, it was wrapped up in an issue around property ownership and frankly wrapped up in some civil rights language. That seems to be somewhat on the table, but then it became an issue of, at least in the publications that Mr. Feiner put out on social media regarding the resolution, it went to his issues around the size of the board itself. And during that time, he actually cited issues that he had with the board members and the open meeting policy. Now, I've personally been to open meetings. They are there. They are available. They are published on the website. And I'll note that in this room with all of these people here, it's not like the number of people in this room is overwhelming. Nor is it often. In fact, so, I guess one of my questions is, based on the things that Mr. Feiner said as were his reasons for expanding the board, is have you received from Mr. Feiner written complaints that he's received about the parking district from the commuters? Have you gotten several of those over the past 4 or 5 years?
2 or 3 maybe.
2 or 3, and were they addressed?
Some weren't even substantiated
Okay.
when we addressed them.
Okay. So one of the reasons why Mr. Feiner states it's really important to expand the board, originally, before any of the Edgemont stuff was even mentioned or published, was that he had received numerous complaints and that the board wasn't doing anything about them. So it doesn't seem like that's a key issue.
Well,
No, wait. I was not allowed to interrupt when you were speaking, so please give me the same respect, sir. Thank you. The other thing that came up was the fact that Mr. Feiner was unhappy with the hours of free parking. And so therefore he wanted to expand or then abolish the board. In your experience in parking management, do you believe that the reasons cited a couple of complaints or the expansion of a few hours has ever been a reason that you're aware of for eliminating an independent parking district?
No.
Okay. So then what ended up happening, at least as far as I can see in following the story, was it became less about those sort of peripheral issues and more about this Edgemont issue. And then in this meeting, at the start of this meeting, there wasn't really even a discussion about the expansion of the board. It went straight to the abolishment of the board. And I have to say that for me as a resident, you know, who uses the parking district, who votes for the board, I find the discussion oscillating between let's make the board bigger or let's eliminate it entirely to be a very, very, very confusing thing. So the next thing that was raised as far as this meeting was concerned during the process while you guys are considering this resolution was Mr. Feiner's view of what the Dwayne Morris memo said. Now, I'm not going to go into the validity of what it is or versus his opinion, because having that kind of a conversation isn't going to be productive. But he did make several misrepresentations about the content of the memo itself. The first conclusion in that memo was that the advice that was given to the EIC was to work with the HPPD to leave everything as is. That was the first thing. And then there were several other mechanisms that were put forth by that Dwayne Morris memo. Now, you have your own memo, and we are not asking for it because it is your privileged information. In the same way that I don't think that anybody on your board or even in the public is asking Mr. Feiner for any of the memorandums or correspondence that he's had with Mr. Spolzino for which he's paid $250,000 to. Because it would be inappropriate to do so, just as it would be inappropriate for you to divulge any privileged advice before your lawyers give you the advice to do so. So I find your lack of Mr. Feiner's motivation for expanding or abolishing the board based upon your unwillingness to give privileged information back to be an absurd request and an absurd motivation for such a thing when he himself is unwilling to do the same.
Okay,
Should
so
be
I don't know how this is productive, though. What are you adding to this conversation?
First off, Mr. Feiner alleged several things about what the EIC has said and what is in the memo as a part of the discussion for considering this resolution. And so at the very minimum, this board should allow me to go and correct that record. That's number one. And number two, I think that it should also be pointed out the dramatic hypocrisy that Mr. Feiner is demanding of that Mr. Feiner is engaging in by demanding from the HPPD things that he himself wouldn't do, like in response. And so I feel as if I have two more points. I think you should allow me to finish them because, again, there were misrepresentations made. Okay. And then you guys can go about your merry way. I think that the biggest thing that I think bothers me about this whole thing is if you really take a sort of a big, giant step back, is, there's... Oh.
No, you're fine. No. He wanted his tissue.
Francis, are you okay?
Yeah, it's just for some reason I brought his box and everybody takes it.
So I think one of the biggest concern that I really have is around this idea of what's democratic, like what's democracy and how is this really supposed to work? And what I think we're sort of finding here is that the story from Mr. Feiner's motivation on why this resolution needs to be in place has changed repeatedly. And what we're really finding is that this isn't really about, the property ownership issue, because if it were, there's a town board resolution that's been circulated that we've helped, we've considered and we've discussed about just simply changing the property rights language if that's in fact something that the board would be amenable to, and you guys can separate out the expansion of the board. Then it became about the expansion of the board. Now it's about abolishing. And it appears that what's really happening is that this isn't around whether or not there are enough people to participate and engage in discussion. This is really around, if Mr. Feiner doesn't get what he wants, he will either install a new majority or he will eliminate you and take control of the assets so that he can do what he wishes with them. And that's not democracy. That's not democracy at all, sir. That's something entirely different and something entirely despicable. And you should be ashamed of yourself for
Now, what's
doing
your
that.
last point? You don't have any.
That's it.
Okay, I just want to mention, just so people know my views, and it's clear, my first priority would be abolishing the board and having the town board take over all the responsibilities of the board. That's what I think would be in the long-term best interests of the town, because I don't think we need all these extra layers of government. The governor has said there's too many entities, and it's a policy-making board, and the elected people from the town board should make the decisions relating to the parking. That's one. The second thing is, if we can't get that, because I'm not a dictator, so the board has to decide, then my second priority would be to abolish the park, ask the state to abolish the parking authority and have a 7-member board. That would be, because I feel more scrutiny, more oversight would be healthy for the town, and there'd be more views. And I'm not looking at this as me, because what we do is going to impact Hartsdale and Edgemont for decades to come. You can't make decisions on a structure of a government based on who's in right now. You have to look, long term. Now, if we can't get that, if the board doesn't feel comfortable with a 7-member board, I would be able to live with a 5-member board, because I feel that a 5-member board would be better than a 3-member board, because there's still more scrutiny. And you know what? We do have 5 members on the town board, so I wouldn't be as happy, but I'd be happier than if there's a 3-member board. And then, I do think at the same time that that the board should meet here, and we should televise the meetings live and have more scrutiny, because I think that there's, and I should also mention that about a year ago, I was sending letters to the parking district managers, to Stephanie and to the parking commissioners, and I remember getting an email from Stephanie saying that the members of and I was copying, residents who had complained, and I think Stephanie said that, the members of the commission did not want to get emails, and they wanted only the emails to go to the director of the parking district rather than to the individual members. So if the members of the individual commissioners haven't received some complaints and concerns, was because for almost a year I honored that request to leave the commissioners off the list of. These are basic. Basic, complaints. Oh, I'm on a waiting list. What can I happen? It's not. These weren't like earth-shaking, concerns. But I was sending her a lot, and she asked me to stop that, and I did. That was I did get an email from her, and what? I'm not complaining, because a lot of people, every time I get an email, I was sending I always respond to everything, so it gets a little overwhelming for people, and I'm not criticizing the board. But again, I also want to mention that if we do expand the board, under no circumstance will I be telling the board what to do or recommend. I feel that every person who's appointed to any board, whether it's a planning board, the zoning board, the ethics board, the conservation advisory, the library board, I have never, since I've been here, told people how to vote. In fact, our ethics laws prohibit us, and I voted for our ethics laws, prohibit the town board from interfering before the planning board and zoning board, on matters. I just really want to do what's long-term right for unincorporated Greenberg, and I really feel that, this is, on most issues, when there's legal issues, it's one thing, but this Edgemont incorporation is such a major issue, and the impacts to people in both unincorporated Greenberg and the rest of Hartsdale and the rest of unincorporated Greenberg and Edgemont are so enormous that I want everybody to see all the different legal opinions. I'd like the governor's office to be involved, and the state controller's office to give us opinions, and to basically say, you know what, the interpretation of the Edgemont Incorporation Committee is right or wrong. I'd like to have, dozens of different legal opinions on this. So when people are actually voting, they'll be able to understand what the real risks are. And I think right now the thing that's bothering me is I don't think people appreciate what the risks are. And I'm going to be real. I know that if Edgemont would break away now, and a year from now, 18 months from now, people lose their parking, people are going to be really upset. On one side or the other, the group that loses the parking, and they're going to be crying to the town board, and we won't be able to say we told you, we warned you, because we're not giving them the information and we're not giving them the facts to make a decision, and that is the biggest problem. Everybody says we should be
suggest that we just move on with our agenda.
So, and
It's
I know
very
Mr.
repetition.
Bernstein wants to speak, but Seth, could you just address the property ownership requirement? Because I know that was a topic that some people were concerned about. I recognize it may not be unconstitutional to do that, but for a tenant, why is it not unfair to a tenant who wants to be a commissioner but can't because they don't own property?
Yeah, it's addressed in the letter. Again, I know I just submitted this afternoon, but it really has to do with the financial responsibility for the bond payments that the HPPD has to make. I believe it's till 2026, correct, the current bond? And the responsibility falls on the property owners in the district. So we feel that's the most compelling reason why it was set up that way and why it should stay that way.
Councilman Sheehan has basically given analogies of other situations where tenants are also making decisions that could bind, municipalities. I mean, how do you respond to that, such that it's fair?
Well, I just heard it, so I'm not prepared to respond at this moment, but I'll take a look at that. Just so we're clear for tomorrow night, there's a resolution that was the same resolution from a couple weeks ago. You've heard us ask to make it 5, not 7. But just so we're clear, there is not a resolution on to abolish the board for tomorrow night, correct?
Not tomorrow night.
Okay. You said that was your first priority, but the other resolutions...
I want to speak to the town board and see, what they want.
Okay. And we'll be there tomorrow, obviously, to answer any further questions. But we really appreciate the opportunity to sort of flesh out these issues, and I appreciate your question, and we'll have to...
Just want to give you one piece of information having to do with the history of the parking district. When it was founded in the 50s, there only were 4 buildings, rental buildings, on East Hartsdale Avenue. The rest of it was farmland still, or open land. You had 150, 160, 170, 68, and 1-11 Columbia. I'm sorry, it's 5. None of those buildings have parking. 68 has a little bit, 1-11 has a little bit. But they don't have enough spaces for all the vehicles for the residents in the buildings now, because in those days people didn't have cars like we have now. All of the other buildings that were built on Hartsdale Avenue, in Rockledge, on Central, have parking for most of the residents in the building. I can't say that if somebody has 2 or 3 cars, they have spaces for everybody, but most people have at least 1 space. Also, the parking district, if you read our application, has an exclusion. We will not offer a commuter permit to anybody on East Hartsdale Avenue. We do believe it's within a walking distance of the train station. So when you talk about the 4 corners, we're all in favor, both as business people and community people, to definitely improve the district. What we have to understand is that the buildings that would be built there are going to have parking, so that the people that reside in those buildings will have spaces.
Mr. Bernstein.
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
What I wanted to address was, first, I don't think I've heard a case made for expanding the board from 3 to 5. And so I don't think there's any evidence or enough evidence to warrant any such change. But what concerns me most is what I have heard is that it's really important to wage a campaign involving Edgemont's incorporation that there be an expansion of the board. And I think that's inappropriate. Let's try to explain why. There are opinions of the state controller and the attorney general's office that say that the town is supposed to be neutral on an incorporation issue. You're not supposed to take sides or spend money or advocate because that's basically using taxpayer money for a partisan political purpose. And that's why you're not supposed to do that. So to try to expand the board to say weaponize it to oppose Edgemont's incorporation or take a position for or against some memo that the EIC put out there is the wrong thing to do. And when you send it up to Albany and ask them to do it, they'll see the same thing. And they'll say, why is the town of Greenberg asking us to take sides in an incorporation battle? That's not what we do in Albany, and that's not what the town should be doing. Now, with respect to the management of the district, I think we heard quite clearly the district is managed very well. And you have oversight over it because Ken attends, and he reports that the district is managed well. So to me, I think the first thing you do is do no harm. Don't make mischief. Yes, the supervisor feels very strongly, it's no secret, how he feels about Edgemont's incorporation. And it's no secret that the rules about not using taxpayer money to advocate for or against incorporation don't seem to apply to him. But that's not a reason to go and try to make an issue with the parking district, particularly where the parking district is saying, we don't agree. Because you have an issue here where a parking district, one government body says, we don't think we need to be expanded. We don't think it's warranted. And the town board says it does. And then we have the record made tonight with what the supervisor's comments were, all about Edgemont Incorporation. It'll be obvious to everybody what this is really about. So my suggestion is you table this for now. There was an alternate resolution about the property restrictions. If that's important to you, you can go in that direction. I happen to be one of those property owners who will foot the bill in the unlikely event that the parking district is unable, through its good management, to raise the funds to cover its bond debt. By legislative fiat, that's my problem. But if you feel strongly that in this day and age we should lift that restriction, I personally don't have an objection to it. But it is valid to have that restriction there because the court has already said it's valid. But to go beyond that and to make mischief, the mischief from 3 to 5 was pretty clear. Ms. Groden said, unless you reappoint me, the town board is taking the position they can appoint 3 people, a majority. And with a majority, we don't know what happens with the appointment process because you have created a situation where all appointment interviews are in executive session. So we, the public, will never know what is said. We, the public, will never know the criteria that were used to appoint anybody. But the mischief that you make by having it go from 3 to 5 when you don't reappoint Barbara Groden is pretty clear. And it will be clear to everyone in Albany if you send this up there. This is another instance of an attempt to try to influence the outcome of an incorporation battle, which right now it looks to be hypothetical until there's no vote scheduled, there's no court ruling one way or the other yet, and we're far from that. So whichever way the court ruling goes, it presumably will be appealed by either side, presumably, and be a long time before that issue gets resolved, I think. But regardless, there's no reason to act now, precipitously, particularly after we heard what the supervisor's real rationale is for doing that. So with that, thank you.
Anything else? Anyone else?
Good evening. In case anyone here doesn't want to acknowledge it, I am a black woman. When I bought my house, there was a restrictive covenant there, 1955, that I could not live in my house unless I was a domestic. Now that this issue has been raised, the town board has a responsibility to all of the people of this community to make sure that anything in town code that restricts the rights based on property ownership to which we were not allowed to have should be removed.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
That was Carol Allen,
Dr. Caroline.
Dr. Caroline.
Okay. So it looks like we've had a full discussion. I know we have some other business we have to discuss. How does the board wish to proceed?
So we're going to go into executive session?
Yeah, we should probably do agenda review. So I think we're finished with the parking district.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your time.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.